All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to React Denver for December. Everybody already found food. If you didn't, there's still some pizza left. There's a bunch of salad, grab a drink, so on and so forth. First off, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Gatsby, tonight. You guys have probably heard of Gatsby. Where did Nick go? Nick ran away. Okay, we'll give Nick grief in a minute. I used to work with him. And also thanks to our sponsors, Turing for providing the space, and Salt Lending for our meetup fees. Go ahead and skip this slide for a sec. I'll let Nick talk about Gatsby in just a minute. As always, thanks to anybody supporting us on Opa Collective, both individual contributors and companies that have sponsored events. We'll also get back to who's hiring in just a minute. Announcements. I don't have anything. Does any? Oh, there he is. Okay. Will you go back to the Gatsby slide? All right, everybody. So this is Nick Duffy. He works at Gatsby. We used to work together at AirDNA. I'll let him talk a little bit about Gatsby, what they do, what's going on, they're hiring, and they've got a coupon code for us. So yeah, Nick, here you go.
Hey y'all, my name is Nick Duffy. I am a software engineer at Gatsby. We build a web application framework that runs on React and GraphQL. I'll let you go to gatsbyjs.com to get all the marketing speak, but what I'm here primarily to tell you about is that we are hiring. gatsbyjs.com/careers. We're hiring for 10 different roles right now, everything from front-end, back-end, infrastructure, system architects, marketing, everything in between. So please visit gatsbyjs.com/careers. You're welcome to tap me on the shoulder after our talks today, or you can email me at duffy@gatsbyjs.com, and happy to talk to you more about that. We also brought some stickers here as well, so enjoy the food that's on Gatsby, and come work with me. I need some help. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. So Gatsby's hiring. For anybody else, feel free, just like at the break, if you want to come up here and write info up here. If there is anybody that's hiring that wants to kind of talk about a position, is there anybody? I'll put you on the spot and make you talk about it a little bit. So, sure.
Hello everyone, my name is Kaushik. Okay. So my name is Kaushik. So I'm coming from Infosys Technologies. So we are a California-based startup, and we are expanding. So we are currently hiring React Native developers. So if you have a little bit of experience, please come talk to me, or you can email us your resume. The job ad is not up yet, so you can email or come talk to me. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Anybody else hiring? No? Cool. All right. Well, we will get right into our first talk, which is Pika Web and a Brief History of ES Modules by Drew Powers. Do handheld or does a headset? Whichever you want. I'll probably do the handheld. Okay. First time.
All right, that means something else is going to go wrong.
It's usually harder.
Okay, cool. So this talk is...
Kind of into it instead of...
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. This talk is called Pika Web and a Brief History of ES Modules. This is a talk I gave at All Things Open in October. This is a shorter version. I'm going to kind of brush over the history a little bit. So during the history part, which I know everyone loves history, if I'm going too fast, like it's fine. Just ask me a question at the end if you miss something. So my name is Drew Powers. I am a software engineer at Manifold, which is a cloud services marketplace. And I came to talk to you today about a problem in front-end engineering, which is the complicated tooling we use and the way we're bundling our code. Fortunately, we have awesome tools that take care of this, like Gatsby. But sometimes if you're configuring stuff, which who wants to do that, you can kind of get into a pickle real quick. So just like out of curiosity, show of hands, like who's ever used Create React App here? Okay, most people. Who's ever done like raw Webpack config or like Babel? Wow, more than I thought. Brave souls. Okay. How many of you really, really, really enjoy doing like raw Webpack or Babel config? No? Strong thumbs down. Okay. Yeah, so it's hard. And something that I kind of like doing. But if for those of you who have done Webpack, there's kind of a story that kind of illustrates like kind of a weird situation we're in, like in 2019. I kind of got the idea for this talk because sometime around last year I had to make a small React component, just like a small like drop-down like thing, the things that we make all the time in projects. But I wanted to open source it, make it a little bit more usable. And so it didn't have an existing setup, so I had to like start from scratch. And it's kind of that whole mental process of like, okay, like how do I get started again? I guess like create React app. And I was like, well, no, that takes a while, and it's just for a tiny component. I just need to write it real quick. And so like, I kind of got stuck. Like, do I use Parcel? Do I use Create React App? Like, do I want to do like a Webpack config? And I spent so much time thinking about how do I even write this tiny React component that I couldn't even write the component. No matter what I use, like I know I can't spend 100% of my time writing React, which is what I want to do. I have to spend like some percentage of my time writing Webpack. And to show you like how complicated some of this stuff is, yeah, I mean like if you look at like this is what goes into Create React App. There's 1,328 dependencies. There's 706 in Parcel. Even with Webpack and Babel, there's 358. So do you have to understand all these? No. Like, do you have to deal with all these? No. But there's so much complexity, and that's what I'm trying to illustrate in what these tools do. And when something goes wrong, like the more dependencies you have, something can really go wrong. Generally when I go through a Webpack config stage where I know I'm going to have to configure something, I go through all 5 stages of bundler grief from denial to anger to bargaining to depression to acceptance. So like I go through these stages and I eventually get through it. I eventually wrote the component, but like it's more time than I want to configure. It's more time than I want to spend configuring. So I kind of like asked a question last year: why are we bundling? And I started looking into it. I was like, well, we bundle because we need to use those imports, right? Well, no, actually browsers understand imports. You can use import React from React in a browser and it knows what it is now. So if browsers support the way that we write JavaScript, why can't we just write JavaScript straight for the browser again? To reintroduce this talk called Pico Web in a Brief History of ES Modules, emphasis on the brief, we'll kind of talk about like how ES modules formed, like why bundlers happened, and what we can kind of do is like the next stage and kind of deal with it a little bit less. I'm just gonna skip over it. That's not worth explaining. Enjoy the platypus. In that light, we're going to talk about 3 initiatives in the Pika project: Pika Pack, Pika Dev, and Pika Web. So I'm going to go over a really brief history of ES modules, then we'll get to like what the Pika project does and why it makes sense. So a brief history of ES modules. When I say ES modules or ESM, that's just if you've ever seen import React from React or export default, or if you see import export in JavaScript, that's ESM. That's what I'm talking about. I'm just saying ESM instead of like import export, basically. There's another slide I'm gonna skip. So in the 2000s, this was like back in like the dynamic drive days. So like you're just writing JavaScript straight for the browser. It was a simpler time. we had the ability to hit view source. Everything is there. But we had to deal with all these scoping issues. As soon as you start jamming these things together, or you include scripts in not the perfectly correct order, everything is broken. It was simple, but also kind of terrible. So fast forward to 2009, a funny thing happened. We made JavaScript for the back end, which, fun bit of trivia, if you're not familiar with this image, that was the proposal for the logo. Which I'm still hoping will become the logo one day. Maybe it can happen. I have a dream, much like this turtle. So with Node, they needed a module system, and this was the module system that they introduced after a bunch of quorums and everything. They came up with what we refer to now as like common JS. So if you see like require, that should have some parentheses. Don't ignore that. Just trust me, it's right. So yeah, this is common JS or CJS, and this is what Node ran on, so like while Node was like garnering like a lot of traction over in one corner, we had another end to the spectrum. Rails became popular. And we had stuff like this, which was like Rails asset pipeline, which if you haven't used this, it was basically just kind of like a shortcut to you bundling all these scripts. And so it was kind of a crude, like all it did was just jam a bunch of files together. It wasn't really dealing with modules. But like the point is, like it's kind of interesting how Node and Rails and like all these people, it's like we're working towards a module system, but everyone has their own way of doing it, basically. CodeKit was also a thing. I'm going to skip over that. And then in 2012, we see the first two tools, Grunt and Gulp, come out of Node.js to manage the front end. And that's we're kind of bringing it closer to React. So Node.js for back end, awesome. Now we have Node.js for front end. Well, what does this mean? So it means you can start getting more intelligent with how you're bundling these files. And these were task runners. If you haven't used these, like that's okay. These are task runners, but it's basically just more and more complicated ways to deal with the problems that we had originally. We're still not at modules yet, but it's getting closer. Like our pipeline is incorporating Node, and we'll see these converge. And then in 2011, 2012, now modules have made their way into the front end with Browserify and ReactJS. And these are a way of taking Node modules and applying them to the front end. That means like I don't have to deal with like loading these scripts in the right magic order to make it happen, or I don't have to deal with these scoping issues because I have two, like the variable in this file called one thing and a variable in this other file called another thing, and like they conflict. So it's nice. Like it's simpler. You only have to worry about what's in the file in front of you and just trust that the module system will take care of everything else. And in 2012, our favorite appeared, Webpack. Everyone's favorite pain in the butt. I love Webpack. It's similar to Browserify, and if memory serves, I couldn't find the story. I think Webpack started because the founder, Tobias Koppers, tried to make a pull request to Browserify and just never got merged. So he got frustrated and made another bundler. So that's anecdotal. I haven't been able to like when I put this talk back together. That was from my memory. So anyways, I don't know. It might be like in like Tobias's like old Twitter, anywhere. So anyways, like Webpack happened, but Webpack is still in CommonJS, the Node modules. But wait, in 2015 there was something called ES modules. The Harmony spec was developed, and yeah, the Harmony spec was developed, and so at 2015, it's just like a loose, like people came up with this idea for import-export. They did it to solve some of the problems with CommonJS, but it's just an idea in 2015. You can't actually like use it yet. It's just a bunch of people got together, consortium agreed on this, and this is coming, but we still can't use it yet. And for the module nerds in here, there is also like two other module types I don't really talk about, which is asynchronous module definition, AMD, and universal module definition, UMD. Those are other competing standards. They don't relate to this talk, but yeah, there were other standards. So it's a complicated world I'm just trying to simplify. So what is this? Again, this is what we're familiar with, like import React from React. This is ESM. This solves a lot of complexity of what we have to deal with. We don't have to deal with scoping. We can deal with like intelligent tree shaking. There's just all these things, all these benefits that come from it. And then finally, 2016, 2017, we get ESM shipped in Webpack 2. So now you can actually use it and actually build stuff with it, which is super exciting. But the point to all these years is, remember that CommonJS came out years ago. Like it's 2017. Actually, I'm going to skip ahead to that slide. Oh yeah, this is simpler. So CommonJS came out in 2009, and in 2017, that's when we can actually use it. So like 8 years of JavaScript and Node development happened in one module system, and now we're trying to switch to the other module system. And by the way, Node kept going in CommonJS, and as of literally weeks ago, you can now use ES modules in Node. So it was released in Node 13.3. ES modules are unflagged, which that's exciting. So yeah, it took 10 years. So 10 years of Node that's all written in one module system that is now outdated. What is the main point is bundlers gave us modules before they were ready. So we got to do a lot of really cool stuff for. So like Browserify came out, what was it, 2012? So like, yeah, I mean, now it's been like 7 years that we've been able to build really powerful, cool stuff with, with modules in the front end. That's amazing. But what kind of cost us is like a fragmented module system. So JavaScript in 2019, this is going to talk about like why the bundler problem is a little bit hard dealing with this fragmented system. So barrier one to the front end, resolving NPM packages is hard. So in the front end in Node, this is kind of easy in a server-side development. Like it was originally developed to be a Node package manager, which is something that every server language requires. But using it in the front end is really weird. Like, where do these packages come from? We need to like download them from some central registry, and then we have to package them up in such a way that like they get deployed as part of our process. Like that's really hard. So in addition to that, there is also kind of and we'll talk about this in a little bit, there's also a little bit of a discrepancy with like how the spec worked out versus how we write. So like how browsers understand ES modules is they can only understand URLs, which means we can't exactly use import React from React. We have to give it a file name, react.js, according to the spec. So it's like we've been really, really close, but the way browsers understand it, there's a little bit of like a tweak. But even that could be a big change in a code base, because that's like in every file. That's a lot of files. Let's see here. Yeah, and then there's just a lot of cruft that doesn't resolve. And then the second barrier is most of NPM is written in CommonJS and not ES modules. So these were the statistics as of a little over a month ago. I don't think they've changed a whole lot, but this is the percentage of NPM that ships some kind of ES module version. So out of all of NPM, if you want to use ES modules and write JavaScript directly for the browser, you only can use about 8% of the packages that are available. Again, and that's understandable what happens when you have a dominant system for 10 years. Even React does not ship ES modules. It only ships UMD and CJS, even as the most recent version. And the third barrier is JSX, actually. So like, we all know and love JSX. I think there was a talk at ReasonConf, like a mini story from the opener about like how React's adoption was because of JSX. So like JSX is amazing, but we still kind of in a place that browsers don't understand it, or they don't understand it yet. So we still need to do something to transform JSX into the create element. Is that right? Create element? The thing I never use. Yeah. So yeah, like, and that's the third barrier. And there's 27,000 sites on StackShare.io recently that use React. So that's a lot of websites that y'all probably use JSX, I'm guessing. I'm sure there's a few wild ones that only use Create Element, so that's really cool. So how do we move forward? And that's kind of where like the Pika project comes in. So the Pika project is a series of open source packages created by Fred Schott that aim to address 2 out of 3 of the previous problems. The third one, JSX, doesn't really have a path forward. I don't know. Maybe browsers can just support JSX one day. That would be really cool. So the ecosystem is kind of like, it's kind of like a bridge from like a lot of the common JS and like the bundler module system into a world where you don't have to configure a bundler, you don't have to configure build time. You can actually just write JavaScript directly to the browser, ship a bunch of files, and everything just works. So what do these 3 do? There's an entire ecosystem. So the first one. The first one is Pika Pack. So Pika Pack is basically trying to address the problem of most of NPM still being stuck in common JS. So if you maintain an open source repo, or if you ship anything to NPM, Pika Pack is an amazing build pipeline. So it looks like Gulp a little bit, but you run it through these transformers, and it'll handle building a node version, it'll handle building an ES module version, it'll even handle building like a CLI executable. I'm a maintainer of a few open source packages myself. I had a configuration like in Rollup that I just built by hand. I replaced it with Pika Pack in literally like 20 minutes, and it actually did a better job of shipping to NPM than I did, and it worked the first time, which is like a rarity. So yeah, if you publish any sort of JavaScript to NPM, Pika Pack will handle that. And it's kind of gearing up towards shipping more ES modules, because this will basically just handle the ES modules for you. It's kind of removing any excuse of like, well, I don't want to ship ES modules, it's hard. Pika Pack makes it easy. And the next part of this is pika.dev. So pika.dev is a registry where you can browse ES module packages. You can search for a keyword, and you can see every package that ships ES modules. So you can use this fancy new ecosystem. And it also has, what I really love, in the search, it also has client weight, because so you can see what the impact is on users, which is super cool. So already it has 70,000 ES module ready packages. It also has a CDN, which is a really cool advantage of just writing ES modules directly, is you can actually use CDNs in your import statements. So if you have multiple code bases, if you have something deployed to NPM or even a private CDN, you can say import React from central CDN. All of your websites can just pull from that CDN, which is really cool. There's also some cool CI/CD tools. But the project I'm most excited about, kind of getting back to the bundler thing, is Pika Web. So I got so excited. I'm a contributor on this project, and I'm helping push it forward. And Pika Web is basically like a no bundler. It's kind of like a way to take a lot of how you're used to writing JavaScript and kind of be a nice little stopgap into a world where you just write straight for the browser and have to manage less. To kind of illustrate what this does, and kind of why, I have one last illustration on why bundlers can be hard. There's a blog post. There's a blog post that Fred Schott, the original creator and maintainer, wrote called "A Future Without Webpack." I would highly recommend reading that. It's easy to find on pika.dev on the blog. So it talks about how shipping ESM on HTTP2 connections, it's incredibly fast, it's efficient. But rather than talk about statistics, I have an anecdote that's going to illustrate why I think ES modules are simpler than bundling. And after I gave this talk, I think it's a little convoluted illustration, but y'all be the judge. So it's a little weird, but there's something that I call the code splitting dilemma, which is something that I've dealt with a lot in just figuring out how to just package stuff in a sane way for clients in a way that's efficient. So it's something that like a lot of frameworks like Create React App, like they'll try to manage for you automatically, and they'll do okay, but they're never like, sometimes they run into problems, and I've run into those problems. So there's kind of an imaginary exercise I want to walk through. So imagine we have a JavaScript app that has reached critical mass. It has reached a size that is slowing down the experience for all its users, and so we have to code split somehow. Our app has 3 routes that we're focusing on, and just for simplicity, we'll just call it index page 1 and page 2, because I'm not very creative with page names. So like this is what we're starting with. This is our huge bundle. We're just gonna like highlight a couple things. There's React and D3, but just trust me, there's like everything. Just like the giant team, everyone just npm installed everything. It's huge. So no matter what route you hit, you're going to get the same modules no matter what. Webpack gives you a really cool thing called code splitting. So what you can do is you can split by the route. But probably what will happen if you split by the route is you end up with this right here where no matter what route you hit, you'll get a different bundle with React and D3 in it. And that's one way to do it. You can avoid it. So we realize, okay, well, we're duplicating stuff. We probably need to be more intelligent about like a vendor bundle. So like only 2 pages use D3, all 3 pages use React, so like let's extract React to a vendor bundle. And then we end up with this. So okay, we have a React vendor bundle that gets loaded and cached, cool. Page 1 and page 2, shoot, they still have a duplicated D3. Okay, cool. So we're going to dedupe that into like a common chunk using like the comment to specify a chunk name for there. Okay, cool. So okay, now we're optimized. Now you only hit the modules from the pages that you load. If I hit page 1, I get D3 in React. If I hit page 2, I get D3 in React, the same D3. Okay, I think we're good. But we have a problem. Our app is changing constantly. So you've just done a lot of configuration, some in your code, some in the Webpack config to get to this optimal state. But your app is changing. Now imagine that someone has to add 3JS on here just on page 2. And now we're kind of in a pickle because we have to decide where to put 3JS. If we load it too early in the main bundle, then now users will probably download it when they don't need it. If we load it in this D3 bundle, well then like if it's only needed on page 2, then page 1 will get it. So like you're always making these little trade-offs where you're kind of trying to find the best scenario for most users. In actuality, I mean, this is kind of like an exercise in futility because it'll never be optimal. This is probably good enough. But it bothers me that it's not perfect. So like, just another way to illustrate this complexity is just if you think about the number of, NPM packages and local modules, there's just infinite combinations that a user will need, and your app is just in constant flux where just dependencies are changing based on the route and new routes are being added. So it's almost like this uphill battle of trying to constantly make sure that your bundle is organized in such a way that it makes sense for users. I connected these dots and I don't remember why. Has anyone here used like Webpack Bundle Analyzer before? Okay, yeah, a couple of you. So this might look familiar. If you haven't, it's like you fire this up and it shows you all the different ways that your application is split. And this is a rendering of a real app that I worked on at my company when I started, which was like almost 3 megabytes of JavaScript, like all together. And it's so easy when you like open up the bundle analyzer to see like, okay, well, like they have all these like different chunks. Like users hit different routes and they get different JavaScript loaded, right? And then you look at what those are called, and you'll see the exact same module like downloaded in a user's cache like over and over and over and over again. It's so easy to do, and it's so down there, and like and you need so many tools to figure out how this code splitting is happening. So again, it's not impossible. It's just hard and a big time sink. Coming from someone that I've at this point I spent like well over 100 hours thinking about this. How is it easier? Well, PicoWeb, just shipping ES modules to the browser is amazing. So if we think about like how do we ship modules in such a way that a browser only downloads what it needs for the page, that's how ES modules works. So like if a browser hits a page, it hits all its dependencies, it hits those dependencies, and it basically kind of solves the resolution problem just from like how the browser works. So what PicoWeb looks like, basically in practice, is it'll turn an import like that into an import like that, and then it'll basically handle the packaging of a lot of your node modules. So even though React has a ton of side dependencies, it's pretty smart about bundling all that into one request. So it can be in one central cache in your website. The three main parts of PicoWeb are pack for shipping code, .dev for finding code, and then web for using and basically building applications. And all that is for ESM. So yeah, that's basically a brief overview of like module history. I want to give a quick demo if there's time, but I wanted to pause here and ask if there's any questions or anything I kind of skipped over. Okay, cool.
If you have a question, just flag me and I'll bring you a mic. The school's out of session, so the AC runs nonstop. I don't understand why that's backwards either, but yeah, so it's just kind of hard to hear, and especially for the stream. So, but yeah, go ahead. And if anybody has any questions, I'll find you and make you use the mic.
And if there's no questions, I can just kind of demo and show a working thing, and then maybe that'll work. Yeah, because this is a little theoretical. Sorry for that. Thank you all for putting up with it. I'm going to mirror so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. So how do you get started with PicoWeb? So there's a really cool tool. Let me see if I can make my terminal a little bit bigger, maybe. So I'm a nerd that uses Dvorak, and it broke all my shortcuts. Yeah, like the plus doesn't work. Dvorak's not better or more efficient. I just learned it as a joke one summer, and I got stuck. So. Wait. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, similar experience. So if y'all use npx before, cool. So yeah, there's a package called pika init, and I'll make it a little bit bigger. So yeah, there's a package called @pika/init, and what this is you can read. They have great docs on there. It's basically like a project starter. It's not really a framework, so it kind of just gets you up and going, and then you just take over from there, and you can customize it. We can initialize a project, and what it'll do is it'll download dependencies, and like I mentioned earlier, there we have a lit element template, we have a Preact template, and we have a Vue template, and hopefully there will be a React template once React ships ES modules. Hopefully soon, but we'll pick Preact, and so what this will do is this will install, basically install dependencies, and yeah. In the meantime, if that takes too long, I have it all ready to go, just like any good baking show. There's something in the oven just waiting. I think it's just, yeah. What it does, it's actually fetching from NPM right now. I'll give that another second. Oh, there we go. Okay. So what did that do? Sorry. Actually, yeah. Then I have to do the same stupid thing. This is like torture, I bet. Oh, it works in VS Code. Nice. Hooray. So what this did is this set up a project for us. We have a source directory. It's actually using TypeScript, which is cool. So what we can do with this is this might look familiar for the most part. It's set up a little nice shortcut here for us, so we can use the things that we're used to. In some projects, you might have to prefix that with /webmodules. But I'm not going to talk about this code because the code itself is uninteresting. What I'm going to do is run. This is probably why good thing I had these typed out. This is why the headset probably is helpful. So I'm going to run the build command, which is already set up for us. And we can also start the server to get a better peek at what it's doing. So what it's doing is it's using TypeScript, so like we need to transform that to JavaScript. And it's made a folder for us with web modules. And then what it's done is it's bundled all the NPM dependencies in there for us. And then we have a preview we can look at. So again, the app itself is not super interesting. But what is interesting is looking at how this is served to the client, at least to me. So if you notice here, it's actually just loading just normal JavaScript files. In this JavaScript file, it's loading just normal imports, which is cool. It's just loading Preact itself, and it's optimized for delivery. And so this is a really efficient way to serve JavaScript. You don't have to worry about code splitting. You don't have to worry about whether it's the right bundle or not. If a browser hits this page, it'll just retrieve the modules it needs to build that page and nothing else. And you can also do the fancy dynamic import function too, where you can asynchronously load modules as well. So all the code that you're used to writing is all just handled, and it's all just handled by the browser. So what we've taken is all that complexity of managing Webpack, and we've just said, here, Chrome, you deal with it. And it actually deals with it pretty well. Yeah, the only downside would just be, pretty much the same downside as like having a giant application. If you just have tons and tons and tons of dependencies, yeah, like the performance would suffer, but the performance would also suffer even if you're bundling it. So it's pretty much the same. It exposes it in a friendlier way to the browser. And what's interesting is, last thing I'll say is, some of you might have noticed, there was no startup time. There was no bundler time. All we had is a little bit of time to transform TypeScript. If you wanted to, you don't have to use TypeScript. Like there's no bundling, there's no recompiling. You save your changes, and they are live in the browser. There's absolutely nothing going on, so it's instant. So that's cool too. So yeah, that's it. That's the end of my demo. Happy to take questions, or yeah.
So that all looks awesome. I guess and maybe I missed it because I was out for the first part of your talk, but why aren't we using this everywhere now? Why should I not go back to work tomorrow and say we need this right now? Because I agree, you paint a really nice picture here.
Yeah, there's really not a reason to not use it now, except like it's hard to convert an existing app. Like that's okay if you have the tooling. Like there's not really a good migration story. This is easier for net new stuff. Like this is not a Gatsby killer. Like if you need to turn React into HTML, there is no other better way to do it than like Gatsby, I think. So yeah, like, and then also, yeah. And also just like, yeah, there are a lot of libraries. Like React is not in ES modules. Like we're waiting for the ecosystem to kind of catch up. It'll get there. Like the whole ecosystem is moving to ES modules, but maybe the thing that you need for your app doesn't ship an ES module version, and all it takes is one dependency, and you can't do this. So it's getting better. There's more and more added every day. So but really, like if you use, I should probably also pull up Pika Dev. If you use the Pika registry, you can search for anything on here. If you start your project this way and just search for ESM modules, then yeah, you should use it now.
And do all the major browsers support this, or is it just Chrome right now? Okay.
No, yeah, full browser support as of, what was the last one? I forget. I didn't have my slide up. It's a little bit less than a year, but yeah, like all current browsers support this. Mobile too.
Another reason that you might not use it is if you have to support the browser which will not be named. That was the first thing that popped into my head.
Yeah.
So then in this view here, if you're navigating around a large app, you're going to be importing a lot of files, and then is Chrome or any modern browser just going to cache every single request to all those files. Yeah, so you'll only do it once, and then you'll rely on the cache.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I was saying before, in the code, what's great is pika.dev actually has a registry, which is basically like unpackage, if you've used that. So if I search for preact right here, if I wanted to use preact, for instance, where is it? That's the README. Sorry, he's done a little bit of changing to this. There is, oh, there we go. Yeah, so like this right here, you can actually use a CDN. So like you could deploy websites to like dozens of different domains, and then if you wanted to use a particular, they could, once that is cached, then all of your websites are using the same cache. Yeah, and that's another huge advantage, like out of the box. If I wanted to import preact from a remote CDN, I could do that.
You mentioned in the beginning that it was fairly easy to bring Pika into the project, the open source module or project that you had. Is it easy to do that on existing ones? Could you do it on, say, React? Could you like fork React and bring Pika in and create ES modules, or is it not that straightforward?
Yeah, like I said, if your project only uses modules that have an ES module version, and if you've checked and all that's good, then yeah, it's not too bad. Because what you can do is like, this gets a little bit into Babel config, but what ES modules requires is like a .js, but if you use Babel, there's like some plugins for like imports. So you can rename your imports. So like if you're clever about it, you don't have to change any of your code. But yeah, all the packages need to use an ES module because browsers don't understand common JS. So yeah, and you would basically know as soon as you tried to load it up. So I mean, I guess the answer is like just try it and see what happens.
Yeah. Anybody else? Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We'll take a quick 5-10 minute break. I actually didn't make it all the way through the slides earlier. I got distracted. If anybody's looking for the restrooms, they're right on the other side of the wall here, down the hallway on your left. There are 2 private restrooms. So, and then if there's anybody else that's hiring that didn't get it up here earlier, feel free to come write that up, and we'll get going with our next talk in 5 minutes or so. All right, everybody, we're going to get started with our next talk from Matt. He's going to talk about composition, context, and prop drilling. And we're going to get to see a really cool thing we just figured out you can do with Code Sandbox. So that's pretty neat. Well, take it away, Matt.
All right. How y'all doing tonight? Yeah, awesome. Really cool. The Pika web was rad. I haven't seen that before. Really good stuff. And he also teed me up a little bit, so thanks. Awesome. This is composition, context, API, and prop drilling. All of us in here use React or know React. I want to talk about some of the problems that prop drilling has solved, and then talk about some of the problems it creates and how we might propose some solutions for that. I'm going to give a quick refresher on what props.children is, and then we're going to give a live code example. A little bit about me. I'm Matt Hooper. I'm a front-end dev at a place called Ombud. We're at 17th in California, and we do some really cool intelligent content curation. We're actually hiring too, if you guys are interested in QA, full stack, platform, SecOps. Come talk to me afterwards. So here we go. So I want to get a quick feel for the room. How many people in here write React every day? All right, not bad. And how many people are using hooks in production or write hooks every day? Cool, all right, good. And how many people in here feel comfortable with or use props.children every day? All right, cool, all right, yeah, well, I'll join that club. So what is prop drilling? Prop drilling is a process of distributing data to the leaves of your React tree through the process of passing props. And so anyone here who's worked on an app that used global state or AngularJS, or like Drew was talking about, we get those namespace conflicts that were really hard problems to solve. And so answering the question of, can I modify or delete code without breaking anything, was formerly really hard. And React has helped solve that problem by explicitly passing props through. So while we might not always like it, that's a really nice benefit of what's happened there. But along with that prop drilling comes a few negatives, I think. So refactoring becomes more of a chore. Imagine you have a component nested 5 layers deep. You've passed your props all the way through. Now if you want to relocate or reuse that, you're potentially unthreading all of those props, putting your prop in a new or your component in a new file, and then threading all those props back through. So that can be a chore. And then with that same kind of move or refactor, we can overpass props. So maybe we didn't unthread those props, and now we're rendering more than we need to, or I jump in the code, and Matt has refactored it, and there's props coming in. I don't know where they're consumed, and they're just not consumed anymore at all. Or worse yet, we're just spreading props, and who knows where those are consumed. So we can also get into underpassing props. So you might have too many default props in your component, and now your app's going to fail silently. And then we also get into renaming or refactoring the shape. So maybe I have a fetch that brings back a current user, and a few component layers deep, I changed that to user, and originally it had a name prop on it, and now I've changed that to have a first name and a last name. So all of these things are complications of prop drilling. So what I'd like to talk about is some solutions for less drilling. And I think the first one is really obvious. We should be more hesitant to break out components in the render method until we really need to. So if you're, in theory, React can render your whole entire app in one render method. So you need to have a reason to break it out. And so maybe it's developer complexity, maybe it's the modules you're importing, maybe it's multiple engineers are working on it at the same time. I'm not suggesting go write your whole app in one render function, but in theory, React can handle it. So if you're breaking it apart, there needs to be a reason to do it, I think. We also want to think about trying to keep state as close to where it's relevant as possible. And there's lots of libraries that help us with that. So obviously we have Redux and we have MobX. React Redux has been really great. You just connect your function, it injects it into props, or you use the new use selector, comes right into your props, and everything's great. But with using those tools, there comes complexity. So there's some other ways to solve it. And I think one that's really in vogue right now is React's Context API. Super powerful, super cool. We're going to talk about how it works a little bit, but then we're going to talk about some of the downsides as well. And ultimately, we're going to focus on what composition is and how to use it in your React app. So a quick refresher on what children are in JSX. Here on the left, we have a simple component. And if you can see, is this big enough for everybody? Not big enough. And that doesn't zoom, I'm sorry. So anyhow, on the left-hand side, we have children in JSX. We simply have an opening JSX tag of welcome page, a closing JSX tag of welcome page, and everything rendered inside of that is the children. And so if you translate that to the right-hand side here, we have the welcome page function. Essentially, it's the same as returning props.children. And if we expand that out, it would be essentially the same as expanding, as returning those two components here. So that's how children work in JSX. And now we're going to jump over to the code sandbox here. I've got some other resources here. A lot of this comes really straight from the React docs. But yeah, good stuff. All right, I'm going to mirror my screen here. Cool. All right, so I've built for you guys a really simple, and can everybody see the code on the left, or that's not quite big enough either? Yeah, let's see here. Cool. All right. So I've got a really simple app here. We're just going to mimic logging in. We have a couple components, as you can see. They're rendered with different colors there, and then we have a log out button. And so a quick tour of the code. We have an app component that has a really simple piece of state. We have a user and a set user function. We have a top header, which is just the gray bar and the React Denver logo. And then if we have a user, we're going to render, I'm going to open this up for just a second. If we have a user, we're going to render a welcome page, and we have an auth button that takes set user, and then renders either login or log out, depending on the state of the user. So inside of this welcome page, it's a self-closing JSX tag. We have a welcome page that passes a user. We have a little bit of styling here with the section tag. We have a header, content, and we're seeing that the user prop is getting passed through and not being consumed here. Scrolling down to content where user is passed, again, a little more styling, an H3 tag, and then we have a greeting component. Again, the user prop is being passed through, ultimately arriving at the greeting component where the user prop arrives and is rendered on the screen. So this is prop drilling. I've passed a prop through multiple layers of components, and it's not being used by many of them. It's just transmitting it on. So one way to solve this is really simply, we're going to import, we're going to const context equals react dot create context. And so we have a context now. We can simply context dot provider. Cool. And we got duplicates. Welcome to live coding. Thank you. Awesome. And we're going to pass a value here. Is everybody generally familiar with how context works, more or less? Okay, so essentially it's the same way Redux works. We're wrapping your component and provider, puts those values in context, and we'll be able to pull them out a little bit later. So we're going to pass the user prop here. We know that the greeting component was the one that consumes it. So here we'll have const user equals react.use context. You pass it the name of the context that you're using. And now, let's say we have a duplicate user prop. If I save this, now we've foregone all of those layers. And so here in the greeting prop, we're picking user off a context. And I'll, just to further demonstrate this, go through and remove the user prop as it's being threaded through all these different levels here. Cool. And we save, and it works. So this is a really great solution. It's really powerful. You can do lots of things with it, and there's some compelling arguments to use this, but it's the same type of argument where you would reach for Redux. Maybe your app is growing, or it's truly global state, something like a user or a theme or a language setting. So it's really great, but there's also a case here. So we have this greeting function that's rendered here, and if we take this greeting prop, or excuse me, this greeting component, and we render it somewhere else in our app, in this case, outside of context, it breaks. We have this implicit prop that we've passed user, and I'm putting this component here in the same way I did below, but this one breaks. And so there's some developer overhead here of why does the other one work and this one doesn't, and if I'm actually passing the user prop, I should know where it's coming from. And so this is one of the complications of using context. And I'll refer to the React docs here too. Before you use context, right here in giant bold letters, if you want to avoid passing props through many levels, component composition is often a simpler solution than context. So let's take a look at what that looks like. We're going to rewind the code here. Does anybody have any questions about context before we jump ahead to composition? I know that was not really explaining how it works, but just an example of a way to solve this problem. Cool. Okay, so now we're going to try to solve the same problem with composition. So we have this welcome page, and one of my challenges as a developer here is this is a self-closing JSX tag. I don't know what this welcome page renders. It could render one component or 100. And if this component was something like dashboard or sidebar, who knows how complex that can be. And you also have lost control over what this welcome page gets to render. Right now we pass in some props and it magically spits out the result to us. So let's explore another way that we might want to approach this. So we are going to, whoa. We're going to take welcome page and we're going to open it up here. All right, so now we know that anything that goes in here is going to be our children. So we're just simply going to take header and content here. We're going to move them up. And instead of passing user here, we're going to pass children. And we'll just render children in this component. Awesome. App works just how it did before. Now we can already begin to see some of the benefits here of removing props, prop drilling here. So now user is in scope for this content component, and it simply gets passed in. And so you could make an argument here that hey, all this component's doing is rendering some style. Maybe we should put that in line too. You get to make that decision, but this is one layer that we can solve. And so now we have the same potential complication with content. It's a self-closing JSX tag, so why don't we open it up and let's go through the same exercise here. And we will pass content some children. So I'm going to go down and see what's inside of content. Great, we've got a couple items here. Let's put them inside of content. And then here instead, we'll take children, and we're going to render out children. Great. App works just how it did before. Awesome. And then finally here, we have the same. Let's see, we can remove this prop because now user's in scope. And this is great. And so now, one of the ways that I like to style my code is if I see a self-closing tag, that to me means that prop is going to be consumed in that tag. It's a nice way for me to know. Otherwise, I'm going to try to reach for composition here. So we look at greeting again. Greeting has a user prop coming in. It's being consumed there, and the app works like it did before. And so I would make a case here that now welcome page is really explicit. I know what's going inside of it. I, as a developer, have control over what gets rendered in there. And you've also lost all that prop drilling. So I think this is a really compelling case. Does anybody have any thoughts on the way we've composed this, or reasons why they use composition in the workplace or in practice, or why they might use context instead of this? Does anybody think this is a cool pattern? Does anybody use composition like this in their workplace daily? Cool, cool. Yeah, so generally for me, I mean, you can't always do it, but I love the idea of I have a self-closing tag that's receiving a prop. That's where the prop ends. You know that you're not prop drilling any further. So if you notice, all the ones we refactored that rendered children don't receive props anymore. And so it's not always possible to do that, and certainly there's cases to pass props and not compose in this manner, but that's a helpful place for me. Yeah. Any questions on composition, prop drilling? Anybody love prop drilling? Really sad that I gave you some options against it.
How do you balance the developer complexity aspect of it? So this example is simple, but
Yeah.
this could, like you said, you could theoretically put everything in render, and you could do the same thing here.
Yeah, I was talking with a buddy before too, and so you can make the counter case here that, hey, this component renders children. I don't know where this component's getting called. I don't know what those children might be, and that's a benefit of passing children, right? You are able to be flexible about what you're passing inside of it. So I think for me, it's the same way I make decisions about a lot of development. It's like what makes sense for me and my team, what makes sense for the code we're writing, and I always want to optimize for readability. I always want to optimize for deletability, and I want to always optimize for a happy future self. So. Yeah, I think for me, I'm notorious for breaking out components like this header one right here. It's a self-closing tag that receives no props. So, very easily this whole component could go away. And, I think if I was developing at work, I would probably do it like that. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of my thought process around, how I'm making trade-offs. Cool. Awesome. That's it for me, guys. Thanks very much for your time.
Well, thank you so much to both of our speakers tonight. If anybody's interested in speaking in the future, do we have anybody booked for January? Do you know, Sam? No, we don't. Okay. So do we have anything booked for the future at all? Wide open. All right. So right now we've got a clean slate for 2020. That's scary. I just said that. Wow. Yeah. So if you're interested in giving a talk, feel free to reach out to one of us, the organizers. Can you guys raise your hands too? So there's. Oh, I totally forgot to introduce you. I'm sorry. Time to get embarrassed. Come up here. And I don't even remember your name, and I'm really sorry, so I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Diana. I'm a student at Lambda School and getting towards the end of it. Really liking web development, so I wanted to get involved here with React and stuff. And yeah.
Thank you so much. And we have a few more team members who weren't able to join us for this event, but yeah, if you're interested in giving a talk, and it can be anywhere. It can be, I was gonna say really advanced. Really advanced React things might lose a lot of people. So I always try to kind of try to find a way to kind of make things relevant to the whole audience that's here. That's anywhere from, the 10, 15 years of experience to just getting into web development, going through school and whatnot. But yeah, and if you have an idea for a talk, but you're not quite sure, haven't given a talk before, we're super happy to help you with that. Whether that's, doing a practice run through on a Hangout or, just kind of like helping you, all right, I came up with this great talk, but it's an hour and a half long. All right, well, how can we condense that down? So, but yeah, so if you're interested at all, feel free to reach out to us. Also sponsors. We have a sponsor for each month that covers food and then just kind of other miscellaneous costs for the meetup. We also have tons of sponsorship slots open. So if you are interested, if the company you work at might be interested, again, feel free to hit one of us up and we can kind of give you the details. Another thing that we went right over earlier, Gatsby has a discount code for swag. I think they have some really cool socks that I've seen.